Okay. So, so this is basically about really lived experience workers within our system, and what difference they can make. What I'm going to do is I'm going to try and share the slideshow from this slide, and a little bit of personal experience in that I actually tried about 15 years ago now to bring lived experience workers into our system in the UK, and in my own organisation. And there was a lot of resistance at that point to bring in people who lived experience. The idea was that it will be it might cause more problems than actually solutions. And there was a number of people who kind of rejected the idea, and I wasn't able to bring it in. However, other parts of the country in the UK have started to experiment with bringing lived experience peer workers into the system, and those experiments have gone very well. And they found a number of things why that was working well, and they actually worked well enough so that the national system, NHS England, are now recommending and funding peer workers to be integrated into our mental health system across the UK. So it's now becoming a regular standard part of the way we deliver care. 15 years ago, there was resistance. Now it's in a very different place. And the reason why is there was a good paper in 2002 by someone called Mark Salser, who described what the real benefits are of bringing people with lived experience into the system. Now, the first thing is social support. So, to have somebody's social network around them can make a big difference in their long-term outcomes. There's very good research data to show that. For example, the ESOP study, which is a study of early intervention psychosis services, which is a very large trial done a number of years ago, they found that involvement with the patient's family and network makes a big difference to their outcomes. In fact, it reduces the suicide rate by up to 90%. So being involved with a social milieu and community around the patient makes a very big difference to their outcomes. However, there are a number of patients who do not have immediate family and social network around them to be engaged with them. So this is where peer workers can make a big difference. They can provide and support with a sort of social network that comes around the patient with people who've had that similar experience. So social support can make a big difference. That is sort of connecting up to the charity sector and other organizations to help find out what local resources there are that can connect to the interests of that person. So social support is a big part of it. The other thing is experiential knowledge, and this is a thing that really struck me the most. There's some things that you can only tell another patient if you've experienced them yourself. And if you haven't, we're always a couple of steps removed. So, often when I see patients, I'll say to them, look, I haven't had the experience of hearing voices. I haven't had the experiences that you and your family have had. But I say, in many respects, you guys are the experts in your experience. So perhaps we can hear more from you. And somebody who's been there themselves can even more authoritatively connect to the patients and their experience. So this sort of experiential knowledge is fundamental. I remember in one of the first meetings I had with a patient with a peer worker with me, she was able to say something I could never say because this patient was struggling with her medication. And the peer worker said to her, look, I have had those same struggles with medication, and I know exactly how it feels to be in your position right now. That experiential knowledge gave her a far bigger ability to connect with the patient, and they were able to have a dialogue and sustain that relationship more than we ever were. I think of other times when in a trial I was in recently where we had peer workers in the team, there's somebody who became quite manic and ended up being sectioned and in hospital. Her relationship with the team was really fractured as a result. However, the peer worker who'd had a similar experience himself was able to keep seeing the patient in the inpatient ward, and that was the only person the patient would trust to maintain a relationship with. So that experiential knowledge can go way beyond sort of our theoretical knowledge in terms of being able to maintain a relationship and maintain that quality of connection that we can have. So it's a unique and pragmatic experience that can really help people. The other thing is the social learning theory, which you may have heard about, which is that through surviving the experience of illness and self-managing their conditions, peers are role models that demonstrate living with a mental illness is possible. Interactions with peers for patients in crisis or service users on a recovery journey are more likely to result in reducing levels of distress and positive behavior change. So this is someone they can look up to. They can see, look, you've been where I've been, but you're you're living your life, you're doing a job, you're getting on with things, and that is really inspiring for people. And again, in a way that only somebody with lived experience can do. So each of these 5 points that Mark also wrote about in his paper on key elements of peer support, gives you an extra reason why peer workers are vital, and they do something that none of the rest of us can do. Now, others of us might have lived experience, but a peer worker's job is to be very open about that lived experience, where they're comfortable to be. They're not required to be in any way, but at least it's in their job description, and so therefore they can do each of these 5 things that the rest of us can't. So, for example, social comparison theory, which talks about individuals being more comfortable interacting with others who they share common characteristics with, which we know. So there's that automatic connection that will forge because someone's been on their same journey. The thing I will never forget, one of the first things that sort of drew me to the importance of lived experience workers was many years ago when I worked in an intensive care unit. So it was a locked, secure ward, and in that unit, we had tended to have 2 populations of patients. Those people who had been on forensic sections, so they had committed crimes, had been in hospitals long term and prisons and come in and out, and they had been in my ward for maybe a year or more. And then the other people, who are often a younger population, who had just come in for sort of very recent violence or some aggression on the other ward, so they'd come into our ward for a few weeks. So there was the short turnover patients and then the long turnover patients. And the people who would come in and out shortly were younger, and those who had been in for a long time were older. And I would often see conversations in corridors between the patients who'd been around a long time and the new younger guys. And the patients who'd been around a long time were able to say to them, look, I've been where you've been. I've been on your journey. And some things went wrong for me, and I want to help you avoid this journey. And that was really inspiring. I was like, wow, they are teaching them and helping them a lot more than I could ever do. So that's what made me realize the really deep level value of lived experience workers. Then there's the helper theory principle, which proposes that there are sort of 4 significant benefits to those who provide peer support, which we'll go on to. And those 4 benefits are an increasing sense of interpersonal competence as a result of making an impact on other person's lives. So to say, that peer worker also gains something significantly from this process. So you can create a sort of circular chain where people who do well then become peer workers themselves and then help others, and they feel that sense of satisfaction. They develop themselves as a result. So there's a really positive, virtuous circle that can be created through bringing peer workers. Development of a sense of equality in giving and taking between himself, herself, or others. So just that sense that I'm not just taking from the system, I'm also giving back to it. So it gives you that sense of equality and sense of sort of peerness with the whole system itself. And then, of course, the peer worker, the helper, they gain personally relevant knowledge. So they can also be helped in their own condition. Many peer worker colleagues that I have often say that, working with this patient really helped me understand myself. And that was really profoundly beneficial to me. And of course, they receive social approval from the people they help. And that can go a long way and make a big difference. So there's all of these factors, that can make this a mutually beneficial process. It's beneficial to the patient, beneficial to the peer worker, and beneficial to the system as a whole. Now, providing guidance for peer support and implementing it requires some special thought, because in my organization, there had not been any peer workers before the national system changed and required peer workers to be implemented. And that's very different to other parts of the country, like Nottingham and other parts of London, where they had peer workers for a long time. So there was an understanding. But there actually needs to be a lot of work with the service itself to bring peer workers in. So the peer workers need training and support, but the service itself needs some training and being able to understand what it is to work with peer workers and making sure they have the right infrastructure and support and facilities. So, for example, it needs to be said that they need time and places where mutual support and reflection can take place. This is essential. Difficulties or personal issues need to be explored. So, for example, there may be something that they see that really resonates and has an echo with their own experience in the past. So there needs to be that provision and support for them on that basis. Peer supervision needs to protect peer workers from just becoming another professional. Okay, and that's often the danger in mental health service. Everybody becomes a generic professional, and there's no difference between everybody. But actually, the peer workers have a unique and specialized role, and that needs to be maintained and supported all the time. They're passionate about their own recovery and for the recovery of others, and for their recovery to help others' recovery, and vice versa. And so that unique role needs to be maintained. and they're utilizing their lived experience of peers to enable other staff members to share the experience. The unique contribution of peer workers are by sharing lived experience should be utilized fully into every respect of the organization from the outset. So all the way through the organization, at the leadership level, management level, there needs to be people with lived experience in there who are supporting the peer workers and thinking that through all the time. I'm reminded of the way in which, when we have peer workers in our clinical team meetings, that, sometimes we'll be grappling with a situation, and the peer worker will say, look, this is how I experienced it on the inside. This is what it really is like, and what it feels like to be in that experience. And that really helped all of us in talking about that. And not only has that been the case in clinical discussions, it's also the case in managerial and operational discussions, where we're talking about the team and strategy and the system and our organization and finances and transformation. Again, having people with lived experience involved in that makes a massive difference. They can tell you what impact that might ultimately have on people in the front line. This should be standard practice, really. So, for example, in Amazon, a completely different organization, the company Amazon, my wife works in Amazon. She's a middle manager in Amazon, and in all of their management meetings, they will have an empty chair where they say, this empty chair, we imagine that we have a user of our service, somebody a customer of Amazon, sitting there, so that at the end of our meeting, we can think about what their experience will be of our meeting and how what we've decided or are thinking about will impact them. And this is the same principle. So when we're in mental health services, we should have the people who our services are for in those meetings so we can learn from them about it. I just came from a management meeting just now, in which we were discussing our large 3-year transformation project in our organization, a very important meeting in terms of really a landmark meeting in terms of understanding how far we've come, what's to go next, what the situation is like. And it was, I said that the best part of the meeting was the fact that we had lived experience workers in that meeting who were able to tell us about the difference it made to them and their own contribution to this change and how they had contributed to the kind of strategic oversight of it and also the delivery of it as peer workers. So that's made a big difference. So it needs to sort of run across the whole organization. And peer workers need to always be engaged in activities that help them to best use their lived experience and protect their privacy. So it's really about thinking about, how can they really use that to the best effect and also protect their privacy, because they can choose what they share and what they don't share. We don't have to expect them to. And peer supervision is, of course, important so that each peer worker has another peer worker at a senior level who can support them. So in my organization, for example, we've got 18 peer workers who've been introduced in the last couple of years, and we have also hired a senior peer worker now who's more experienced, who can actually bring experience to bear, and so provide regular supervision and support for the other peer worker colleagues. So that is just in a nutshell, really, the key things that are sort of put together in terms of thinking about peer workers. As I say, it makes a huge difference to the service. It really helps us to anchor the service in the right values. It also helps to deliver the service in a way that enables us to maximize the connection and the therapeutic relationships with patients. Having spent years wanting to have peer workers, in the last 5 or 6 years I've been working with peer workers in open dialogue. We have, I might have a slide about open dialogue. What we've done is we've had peer workers embedded into the open dialogue, a model that we've created. We call it peer-supported open dialogue, because what we want to do is to transform. This is a peer worker who works with us, a peer worker trainer, and the way she describes it, we're not only here to transform open dialogue, we're here to transform peer support as a practice. Connecting the two paradigms is a complete revolution in the way we work in the NHS, and show. So, again, open dialogue is a methodology of working that is very compatible with peer work, and the two things can learn from each other. And that's what we found in peer-supported open dialogue. It's really helped us to change the way peer work is also involving peer workers in the direct business of delivering care and forging relationships and putting relationships at the heart of the care we deliver. So that's in simple terms the difference I think peer workers can make across the organizations at multiple levels, and I think improve the quality of our service that we offer and the outcomes for patients ultimately too. So I'm going to just stop sharing there. And